But first, let's do a little refresher course on how warm and cuddly the Muslim Brotherhood really is and how they came to be. Watch.
The Muslim Brotherhood plays a very interesting game with groups like Al-Qaeda, which it occasionally ostensibly condemns, particularly when it's with respect to terrorism that's committed in the United States, but otherwise is a cheerleader for, especially when it's terrorism that's committed against Americans outside the United States.
In the summer of 2010, Al-Qaeda signaled that the Brotherhood should recognize that the time had come to move beyond stealthy, pre-violent operations and to start bringing down Middle Eastern regimes that were not implementing Sharia and were aligned with its infidel enemies. As regime opponents took to the streets in early 2011, the Muslim Brotherhood played its hand carefully. Initially, its operatives allowed secular, democratic youths to enjoy the greatest prominence. Over time, however, the Brotherhood asserted itself more and more. The Ikhwan's groups and political fronts inexorably emerged as the most disciplined, organized, and ruthless opposition forces, particularly after Mubarak was overthrown. After the military removed Mubarak from power, its Supreme Council made what amounted to a workable, if uneasy, separate peace with the Muslim Brotherhood. The ruling transitional junta dropped a 30-year ban on the return to Egypt of one of the world's most visible and influential Sharia authorities, Sheikh Youssef al-Qaradawi. Qaradawi, who is considered the Ikhwan's spiritual leader, has his own television program on Al Jazeera and routinely uses it to inveigh against the United States, Israel, and infidels more generally.
تأديب كان تأديب هتلر استطاع أن يوقفهم عند حدودهم.
Qaradawi's return to Cairo on this occasion was triumphant and eerily reminiscent of the extraordinarily warm welcome given another cleric, Ayatollah Khomeini, when in 1979 he came home from exile in France and began his hijacking of the post-Shah political transition in Iran. The military permitted Qaradawi to use his address before a crowd of over 1 million to foment demands for Sharia. He declared that the army would support the Ikhwan and vice versa. Qaradawi also called on Egyptians to join him in marching on Al-Quds, the name Arabs and other Muslims use to refer to Jerusalem, and to become shahadin, meaning martyrs willing to give their lives to assure the triumph of Sharia. By the time parliamentary elections took place in late 2011, Egypt's Muslim brothers had successfully mobilized their supporters and parlayed their organizational heft into votes and victories at the polls. The Muslim Brotherhood's decisive victory in Egypt, together with its similar successes in 2011 in Tunisia and Libya, seemed to vindicate that the time had come for Islamists to overthrow governments elsewhere in the region.
Joining me now is Frank Gaffney. He is the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. He created a 10-part course called the Muslim Brotherhood in America and has been ringing this bell for a long time. You and I stood at that chalkboard. I mean, that map was made for the day you came on, and I said, help me out, because I think this is the way it's going, and you said you thought so too. And here we are, standing on the brink of, agree, World War III?
It is certainly likely,
right.
not just possible, likely that we will have a regional conflagration in the Middle East within the year, I think.
Okay.
And will that translate, you point back to 1914, will that translate into a world war? It's entirely possible.
I mean, what do you think Russia's going to do? What is China going to do? They all actually have given us a red line, and I believe they mean it. When when the foreign, or the, yeah, I think it was the foreign minister of China said, think thrice before you do this. Don't you think China means what they say?
Yeah. Well,
I do.
If you had any doubt about it, look at the fact that they've put naval forces in the Eastern Mediterranean, including the Chinese. I think that's the first time in recorded history. It's certainly modern history. That's not just red line, Glenn. That's enforcing the red line. That's right.
Okay, so let me go back to the Muslim Brotherhood. Before I forget one more piece of this, and then we can start tying it all together. I wanted to believe, I never did, but I wanted to believe the president was just naive. But by the president yesterday saying, I'm waiving this law, he is admitting, wouldn't you agree? He knows he is arming and giving aid and comfort to Al-Qaeda and our enemies. Yes?
At a minimum, he is aiding unspecified terrorists, and in practice, because the principal terrorist elements in Syria at the moment are Al-Qaeda, and their kissing cousins, as you pointed out in the package, the Muslim Brotherhood. So yes, he knows that's who's getting arms and probably funds and training, and he has to put this natty little law out of the way. I mean, it's kind of refreshing that he actually notices that there is a legal impediment to this kind of misconduct. Yeah. But it does raise, I think you're absolutely right. Has he crossed the red line into treason?
Is it at least, I mean, treason is hard to prove, and it requires death penalty and everything else. But at least, is it not a line that is an impeachable offense?
It certainly seems to me, if the oath of office that he took to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
right,
has any meaning whatsoever. He has breached that oath of office, and that is, I believe, a high crime and misdemeanor.
Okay, so I can no longer say that he just thinks the best of the Muslim Brotherhood and everybody else over there, because he now is recognizing, no, I have to take that designation away or I can go to jail. I'll be breaking the law. Okay, like you said, refreshing. But now, let's say he doesn't think it's Al-Qaeda, because then it's treason. Let's just say he's aiding the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, he's admitting also, by taking that away, that that is a global terrorist unit. And somehow or another, somebody has just gotten a promotion, even though we don't have a director of the Homeland Security anymore.
Right.
This is a guy that you rang the bell, and Louis Gohmert rang the bell for a long time on. Tell me who he is first, and then tell me what they've just done to him.
Mohammed El-Biari is his name. He is something of a local figure in the Dallas region. He established an organization called the Freedom and Justice Institute. That may sound familiar. The Freedom and Justice Party, of course, is what the Muslim Brotherhood established in Egypt.
The guy who is running the rebels in Syria came from Dallas, same organization.
Indeed, a man known to and admired by Mohammed El-Biari, as a matter of fact, and who makes no bones about the fact that he is this prime minister of the Syrian opposition, a Muslim brother. Mohammed El-Biari came to greater prominence because he was deemed by the Public Safety Commission to be a helpful Muslim outreach figure, and they put him on their advisory board. That in turn got him a position on the Department of Homeland Security's advisory board up in Washington when Janet Napolitano ran the place. That put on a key advisory board a man with extensive ties and unmistakable sympathies for the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm sorry to say he's not the only one, but he's been one of the most prominent and arguably one of the most successful of those running influence operations against our country on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood, or certainly in alignment with it. Let me just tell you this story quickly because it's kind of jaw-dropping. In September of 2011, the then director of the FBI decided to thank Mohammed El-Biari for his help in Muslim outreach by giving him an award personally. They chose the FBI Training Academy at Quantico, Virginia as the venue. About 6 days after this ceremony, the first of a series of screeds began appearing in something called Wired magazine, written by a radical leftist by the name of Spencer Ackerman. Those screeds began piling vitriol on the FBI for having all this offensive material for Muslims in their training documents. What was offensive about it? It seems basically it told the truth, that there is a connection between Sharia and jihad and terror, what we call terror. Within another couple of days, Mohammed El-Biari had organized a group to demand that the FBI purge these materials. And within another couple of days, he and another larger group of both Islamists like him and leftists demanding that it wasn't enough that the FBI no longer know what we're up against. We now had to have the military files purged, the intelligence community's files purged, and the Department of Homeland Security's files purged.
Okay.
And there's another piece to that which we'll come back to.
And we'll come back to that, and then I'll tell you the happy news of where he is now. Where's your line? Where's your red line, America? Where is your red line? Back in a minute.
On June 30th, 2011, President Obama had his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, announce that the United States would open relations with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
We believe, given the changing political landscape in Egypt, that it is in the interests of the United States to engage with all parties that are peaceful and committed to nonviolence, that intend to compete for the parliament and the presidency.
Yet another in this series of concessions and favorable treatment given to the Muslim Brotherhood is the State Department's clearance of the way for Brotherhood operatives to obtain visas to enter the United States. Hillary Clinton personally intervened on January 20th, 2010 to overturn the George W. Bush administration practice of blocking a U.S. visa for Tariq Ramadan on the grounds that he qualified, under the Patriot Act's authority, to be denied travel papers to foreigners who use, quote, a position of prominence within any country to endorse or espouse terrorist activity. Unlike his grandfather, who the Eisenhower State Department identified as an Islamic fascist, Ramadan is a slick advocate of Islamist causes in the West, skilled at obscuring his jihadism behind a smokescreen of lying for the faith, or taqiyya. In particular, Ramadan has mastered using the postmodern language of the left to rationalize the use of Sharia in government. Even the fact that the U.S. government had previously found that Tariq Ramadan had provided material support to a designated terrorist group, Hamas, was not deemed an impediment to Hillary Clinton clearing the way for him to receive a visa. He has subsequently been feted at George Soros's Center for American Progress and countless forums of the far left.
Frank, this is so nasty. I mean, this is just, I wonder if it's too late at this point, but it's something that everybody needs to know. Finish the story about our new promoted friend.
Mohammed El-Biari not only succeeded in having the files of all of those in the front lines of protecting us against the Islamist threat, their files purged. He also, through an assignment he enjoys on the Countering Violent Extremism Working Group. Countering violent extremism is the euphemism that we now use instead of terror, which of course was the euphemism we used to use instead of jihad. The Countering Violent Extremism Working Group, Glenn, I mean, you just can't believe this, but they've promulgated guidelines which say if you're going to use federal funding to train people about this violent extremist problem, you must first consult with community partners. They don't say, like Mohammed El Biari or Mohammed Majid, the president of the largest Muslim Brotherhood front group in the United States, the Islamic Society of North America, which, by the way, he's also on that countering violent extremism.
And he's the guy who the president sat with.
Yeah. You know, get this. This course, MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com, it's available for free.
Yep.
Please take a look at it.
Please take a look.
We talk about several of these folks, Mohammed Majid, Mohammed El Biari, also a woman, fortunately, no longer in government, but who was, until recently, at the right hand of the woman you were just showing, Hillary Clinton. Her name is Homa Abedin. And I believe when Louis Gohmert and Michelle Bachmann and others were asking, basically, for inspectors general of 5 departments to examine whether people like these with extensive ties to the Muslim Brotherhood were actually shaping policies on behalf of our government to bring them increasingly in line with the Muslim Brotherhood, just as you showed a moment ago. They were mercilessly attacked, most especially Michelle Bachmann, as you know. And one of the reasons was because they had impugned this young woman, this very nice
Anthony Weiner's
Homa Abedin, who'd suffered from Anthony Weiner's misconduct. In the middle of that controversy, Glenn, in the middle of this controversy, the President of the United States, I believe, had on one side of him at the Eid dinner at the White House the president of the largest Muslim Brotherhood front organization in the country, Mohammed Majid, and at the other, Homa Abedin. If you want to know where this guy sits, it's smack dab with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay, so now tell me what has now happened, because now we have gone from the advisory council to a new position in Department of Homeland Security. We'll go there next. Okay, so Frank and I are talking about Mohammed El Biari, and he is a guy who was in the Department of Homeland Security. What's his name? Congressman Louis Gohmert was said, hey, will you check? She never checked. Now Janet Napolitano leaves, she's vacated, and this guy now finds him not being checked, but being promoted by the president. What position is he in now?
He's been re-upped, as I understand it, to be on this Homeland Security Advisory Board, which is a high-level deal. But he's also bragging about having now been given some additional status. A little unclear to me where it is in the food chain, but evidently it's enough of a deal that he thinks it's important to brag about it. He calls himself now a senior fellow in the Department of Homeland Security, I guess attached to this advisory committee. The point of all of this that's so stupefying, Glenn, is we're hearing from this guy, and we've got an interview coming out, by the way, with him in the next couple of days, in which he makes clear his affinity for the Muslim Brotherhood. He makes clear it is his purpose to stop the prosecution of people in connection with material support for terrorism. He makes clear that he's on the wrong side.
Right.
And that's not something, I believe, we need informing our Homeland Security Department.
Especially since his buddy is in charge of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, where we are handing them weapons. You want to talk about being able to get back into the United States? Well, there's a clear route just right there. We've got about a minute and a half. You know, you and I were talking about feeling frustrated, and I can't urge you, America, enough. Go to MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com and watch the course on the Muslim Brotherhood. Know who your enemy is. But beyond that, the weakest link in the chain, the one that you could actually have influence on, is Congress, the Republicans, because the Republicans are just as bad. Just as bad.
Yeah. Look, you've made the case in your monologue in an earlier segment that we have problems with the leadership of the Republican Party in Congress. And I was telling you about that story about 5 members, Michelle Bachmann, Louis Gohmert, and others, asking for formal investigations. Who were the most critical of them? John McCain, John Boehner, my friend Mike Rogers in the Intelligence Committee, Marco Rubio and others who attack them basically for doing the dangerous thing of asking for these investigations.
They have fallen in with the wrong crowd. And
Part 10 of the course talks about what you can do about it. It's possible to make a difference as an individual, as members of organizations or groups, and as citizens of the country. And I think you're absolutely right. Get started by learning what the facts are. You've got to know this stuff, and MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com is one way to get it. And then you need to bring pressure to bear on the Republicans who are our only hope at this point.
Frank, thank you for all of your hard work. Thanks for your honesty. MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com. Final thoughts next.